with Jason Buck. He is running, as I said, for the 2nd Congressional seat. His website is Jason Buck for Congress. And we have been talking about issues that are facing the United States, issues that he would be dealing with if he were serving the state of Utah in the 2nd Congressional District. Jason, I'd like to move on. Go ahead and finish what you're saying. If you want to sum up what we were just talking about, national security, go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to the next section, okay?
Okay. You know, you just have to, in short, and it's very simple but very hard to do. On the national security, we have to have those control of our borders, Canada and Mexico. We have to work with our partners to the north who have oceans on each side of them and really push them to know who they have immigrating into their nation. We're in a day and age where the fact is we have to know the backgrounds of the families that are wanting to come into our nation, and are they from nations that are very hostile towards us? Are they from nations that, or do they have relatives and close members of their family that are espoused terrorists or Hezbollah or and so forth? Just common sense. Israel has a great model, and they don't worry about political correctness. They worry about keeping the people of their nation safe. And we have to know who is immigrating into our nation. We have to know what their past is, who their relatives are. You know, we have to, could they end up being a threat to us here? We have to know who is in here. Are they hardened criminals? And we've got to know our borders. And we've got to have a sound immigration policy, worker visa program. They need to be identified by the federal government when they're guests of the United States and not American citizens. That's separate. Instead of forcing the states to deal with all these issues haphazardly and trying to fix it themselves out of desperation. And when we identify these guys and they know who they are, then it becomes efficient, safer for them. We get the criminals out of our nation. People get in line to become citizens, no amnesty, and live by the rule of law.
Okay, that works for me. I like what you say there, and I agree that that is precisely what we need to do. Now let's move on. We already talked about this, about creating jobs here in the United States. We have record unemployment. If we look at and realize, people, that when we look at these 9-point whatever numbers that they are spouting from the Obama White House, realize that those are just people who are on the unemployment rolls. They are not talking about anyone who has actually run the course of the unemployment checks and have fallen off those rolls and who have still been able to get work. They're not talking about those who have tried and tried and tried and just given up. So actually our unemployment is much, much higher, into the high teens easily. And so, Jason, yes, on your website, you listed issues, and the very first one you had was creating jobs. So why don't you talk to us about how we can get the people of America back to work?
Well, I believe, as I said, I'll always return back as a litmus test, say that right, for talk, is to go back and say, is what they're doing constitutional? Is it within the framework of a constitution as our founding fathers intended? Is it proper balance between federal and state? I think our major problem now, I just cringe when I see Obama in Washington, D.C. come out and say we want, $500 billion or $1 trillion or whatever crazy number they come out with for a job stimulus plan. Because where does that money come from?
From us.
From us. It's printed thin air right now, but eventually comes from us because it's our debt. And the government is so inefficient. That money goes to things like Solyndra, and we're seeing maybe in a bigger mess than that coming out with other things coming forward. It is, how many cents on the dollar do we get back from the federal government when the founding fathers intended for that money to be in our pockets? The closer we can get it to the individual's pocket, the more efficient it is, the more jobs that are created. Entrepreneurs create jobs, small businesses create jobs, big corporations create jobs, because their incentive is to grow and to be profitable. But when government taxes and regulations get in the way, that stymies growth. We have to get government regulations out of the way. We have to reduce them to a minimum level possible. We have to put as much power in the state's hands as possible. I believe federal regulations, unless they are an absolute federally constituted matter should all be left up entirely to each individual state, because each individual state should be able to weigh that regulation and its value to them, whether it's use the transportation department, for example. Here's one of our big problems we have. They take our taxes and they put it into the transportation department. The transportation department comes back to Utah and says, you know what, Utah, you get to have this I-15 project, so it's the money we took from you, Utah. We're going to give it back to you only if you live by these federal regulations that we are implementing upon you.
That's exactly what they do. It always comes back with strings attached, and they're untenable strings.
Yeah, the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, they all do it, right? And they hold with our own money. And it's horrible. It's wrong. They should not be able to do that to us. It's inefficient to have our money go there and come back, number one. I think a department like the Department of Transportation or Department or EPA, Energy, should be nothing more than an executive assistant for the state, meaning they're back there, a very small department doing R&D research, feeding the states information for each state, have a representative for each state, give us information, and the state legislature for Utah, for example, can say, you know what, Department of Transportation, we're going to take part of this one that you suggested, all of this one you suggested, these other three you suggested, we're going to say no, all of those. Now, California might take those 5 suggestions and say, we're going to take all 5 of them because we're California, and we're going to overregulate California.
Because we can't do anything right.
We can't do anything right. The point is, Utah knows what's best for Utah. And what the federal government has done is taken that right away from us and through taxes and the 16th Amendment and be able to just tax the heck out of the states and take control of it and then come back and dole our money out back to us with strings attached. And that way, same thing in education. They control our education through taxes. And we have got to...
Let me ask you this, Jason. I personally would like to see some departments that I believe are wholly unconstitutional done away with on the federal level, and you just named several of my top picks.
Yeah. You know what? As I said, at minimum, I think they all need to be evaluated. I think you could absolutely do away completely with some. And at the minimum level, the example I use, in any organizational, officer of a company could design a workflow for a small department about 10% of the size it is right now that just acted as that executive assistant information promoter, which the federal government should just promote the welfare of the states and the citizens, not provide for. But if they're funneling good information and research to the state and suggestions, that's the farthest it should go. They should never have autonomy. They should never be able to enforce a law or regulation over a state unless it's an absolute federal issue.
Well, let me ask you this question. How do you feel about the Department of Energy acting as a bank?
It's absolutely insane and ridiculous. It shouldn't, and Salima is a great example.
Yes, it is, and Salima is only one of many.
Yeah, it is wrong. It's wrong constitutionally. That is an example of us getting outside of the framework of the Constitution. The pendulum has swung so far over to the central government, which our founding fathers feared, and these are the problems we get from it. So the answer to job creation is getting federal government out of our lives. Why are we sitting here saying we're going to actually cut back the military of the United States, and they're not talking on the news about cutting back Energy Department, EPA, Transportation Department, Department of Education, all these huge government, and these government agencies are just like the ancient dukes of England, right? They just, in Europe, they overlords of all of this, and why they came to America to get away in the first place. They answer to nobody. They, on a signature of a pen, they shut down 10,000 acres of land in California because of a minnow swimming through it. When, Utahns love their land. Utahns care about their land. Utah doesn't want to pollute their land. They don't want to clear cut their forests. But Utahns want to manage their land. And Utahns know the best regulations for Utah to keep us, pollution free and minimal pollution, but take care of our industries. Selectively harvest the forests and plant grass seeds through them, so we end up with more deer and more elk and better hiking and better sportsman areas, and actually get good jobs from our land. I mean, to mine our land, to have oil, to use our resources. But Utahns know that, but we end up with some, Columbia graduates in an office back at the EPA telling us what lands we can farm and calling it wetland and everything else, and not let Utah.
Ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Just to go over some numbers from the Department of Energy, Solyndra was given $500 billion. Evergreen Solar, I couldn't find the number, but they were also given a loan. Beacon Power Corporation, $43 million, and that loan came in after NASDAQ notified them that they were in danger of being delisted because their shares weren't even worth $1. Enerdale, $118 million, delisted. Their shares were at 9 cents, and we still gave them money. SpectraWatt, I couldn't find the money. SunPower, $1.2 billion, and then the debt that company has is worth more than their assets, which, is bankruptcy waiting to happen. The Department of Energy has got $35.9 billion out in loans right now, and I don't know how they do their math because I just added up way more than that. And then the total jobs, and this is on their own website, Jason, total jobs from what they've been doing, 64,776 jobs. I did the math. That's $554,217.61 per job.
Yeah.
The Department of Energy has to go away. And I think maybe one man. Department of Education is duplicated over 80 times.
Yeah, it's duplicated over 80 times. And then they step into Utah and try to enforce their morals upon Utah. And nobody knows the morals of Utah better than Utah. And nobody knows how to teach Utah students better than Utah teachers and Utah parents. And there shouldn't be a National Department of Education holding back money from the school district in Utah unless the school district Utahs do exactly what they say. For example,
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the Granite School District case, a few years ago when they didn't want to allow the homosexual clubs inside the Granite School District, and the Department of Education immediately was going to withhold, millions and millions of funding to the Granite School District. And so they had to do away with all the clubs in the school.
Which is ridiculous because since when is a club based on sexual preference?
Yeah, but that's Utah. What's the federal government coming and doing and telling Utahns how to conduct themselves and their morals? Absolutely. And they can our tax dollars and hold it over our heads.
It's ridiculous in every possible way. The federal government has rewritten history. I mean, if you want, as you well know, if you really want to get the true history, you have to go back to textbooks and books and documents written prior to, Clinton rewrote them during his presidency, but they'd been tampered with already by then. I don't know, probably back 100 years before you can get to the truth of what's really happened in this nation. And the federal government continues to issue new textbooks, rewriting our history. They as you said, put in regulations and restrictions on schools within the states, within the cities, within the communities, which should, in my opinion, schools should be controlled on a local level. Now, I have no problem. Yeah, I have no problem with the states, where they have to report their numbers, and the states say, "Hey, listen, you got to bring those numbers up. Those are some bad grades there." I don't have any problem with that.
So if we could take all that money that's going to Washington, D.C., and let's say our school, the number that gets back to our schools, for every dollar that goes back to the Department of Education, our schools get, $60 back or something terrible like that. Well, wouldn't it be nice to have a dollar out of a dollar and have Utah control its education from top to bottom at the local level with our teachers and our school districts? And as parents, knowing that we could have the best education in the United States of America and not be living by Washington, D.C.'s regulations?
Oh, it would be amazing. And since you'll be representing Utah, let's go ahead and talk about Utah and our natural resources that we have here. The federal government owns nearly 70% of this state, and and Salazar wants another 1 million plus acres.
Yeah.
And we're being hamstrung in the state of Utah from using our own natural resources, and yet we are still relatively successful, although our unemployment is a little over 7%, and we do need to get that down. But we are being restricted by the Department of Energy, by the EPA, and by the federal government from utilizing our own resources, which could take our education through the roof, which could take our roads to be some of the best roads in the nation, which could make us completely independent of the federal government, save the responsibilities that the federal government is given in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. That's what I would like to see, Jason.
And we're 100% on the same page. I will go back there, and we're in a states' rights fight for our lives right now. And we have got to go back and balance the Constitution in the states of like mind, like you and I are speaking, and there's other representatives around the nation, whether it's from Mississippi to North Dakota. I will find them. And I'm the kind of person that just knocks down doors. I build relationships. I build coalitions. And we have got to get the states of like Utah to Mississippi to Nebraska, the states of 2 million to 5 million to 6 million people, to really unite in this state's fight. And if they're taking our lands, they'll eventually take their lands also. And we need their support. And we've got to fight this encroachment from the federal government and get the use of our lands and get our lands back. And not allow the Sierra clubs and everybody else to come in from California and their big national Soros, backed groups to influence the lands of Utah.
Oh, absolutely. And I do know several of the people that you need to connect with because I've interviewed a lot of them, and I will pass on names and contact information, and you can begin building those coalitions, because we have got to send people such as yourself back there who are not afraid to roll up their sleeves and get into a fight over it. We are fighting for the very survival of America right now. We can't send back namby-pamby people who don't have a spine.
And we cannot send back elitist political insider bureaucrats. We've got to have people that function in the private sector, problem solving, losing money, losing businesses, building businesses, being stolen from, going through life that we all go through, having government overregulate us, having the IRS come and pick on you. People that have been there in the mud, fighting it out with everybody else, they can go out and get a job done. You'd be amazed in my trip to Washington, D.C., as I've been doing my homework here and meeting with the people I have to meet with, how dysfunctional Congress is. Within the hall of the Republican Party there, they really, in Congress, they don't talk to each other. They all live in their offices like little fiefdoms. And they're not, and I said, you mean you're not getting on the whiteboard like once a week and saying, hey, what do you think of my idea? And, well, no, let's refine it, and this is a little better if you do this, Jason. And, yeah, hey, you know what I'm saying? You just get together and work. Oh, no. Nobody wants to give up their own idea because they want credit for their idea, and they're afraid to let people steal their ideas. And then
we need to replace them all.
I was blown away. I said, you're telling me that I'm not getting on a whiteboard with other men of like mind once a week and just hammering out our ideas on the whiteboard and saying, well, look, let's get together on this. And they said, it rarely happens. And I said, well, with me it happens. I'll guarantee you that, because I get
to tell you, I want to send you and Carl Wimmer back there. I want the two of you walking shoulder to shoulder down the hall and just saying, okay, enough of this crap that has been going on here. It is time for this body to function as it was intended to function, and it's going to start now. I want to send the two of you back there because you're both no-holds-barred, bare-knuckle fighters.
Yeah. And I tell you, I'll be in with Jason Chaffetz and Rob Bishop, and I'll go over with our senators, and I'm gonna be going down the hall to North Dakota and Mississippi and Nebraska and Montana, and I'm gonna be hammering it and making sure I get the coalitions built and people working together like mind, because I just want to shake things up. I want to protect our Constitution. I want to get back to the efficiency of states' rights. When you have a bureaucrat like Barack Obama get up on TV within the last couple of weeks and say it is the businesses of America have grown lazy and have not promoted foreign investment, and it's their fault that we don't have better foreign investment from over the years.
Made me crazy. Top of my head about blew off.
I about blew off. I went, there is a man that's president of the United States that doesn't even understand the economy and how a free market economy works and why we don't have more foreign investment. I was just screaming. I said, buddy, foreign investment coming here, because they get on a whiteboard and they go, okay, taxes in the United States are this. Regulations in the United States are this. Oh, yeah, and if we come to the United States, they make us sign something that protects the big unions in the United States, so we got to be able to have the same big union laws, that Michigan has and everybody else to appease the Democratic Party, right? And so we have to do all this, and they're like, ew, well, man, Singapore has lower taxes. They have less regulation. We don't have to do that big union stuff. And so why would they?
Even FDR said that public officials, employees should not be unionized because it would create a disastrous recipe, and it did.
But they'd set it up where, they can't, even though a foreign country would like to invest and build their company in Utah because we're, right to work state and have flat tax and better regulation on this and that, they get punished, and they're not, if they do come here, they've got to follow the union laws that are set, nationally.
Which is ridiculous.
Ridiculous. It's insane. And you got a president of the United States that makes that statement when you're like, as a business in the United States, corporations don't have emotions. Corporations are profit-based, right? Yeah. And so we're losing businesses from the United States, and they're not bringing money back home. We've created an environment that's so punishing that corporations, just black and white, go, oh, it's more profitable to operate in X country in Asia than it is in the United States right now. And it's not just labor cost. I'm telling you, it is. Labor cost is obviously part of the equation, but the total equation is many things that they put in there. And if they could keep their company inside the United States and have the productivity of American citizens, which are far greater than anybody else in the world, and pay a higher salary, but if you have taxes in there that are correct, regulations that are correct, right to work, all these different issues, then they put in their efficiency model, oh, it's better to stay in America. It's not, because we're going to go to Mexico and pay people $2 an hour.
Well, it creates jobs in doing that. But we have an administration, Jason, who is violently anti-business. Yes,
they are. Violently anti-business. You walk like a duck, you quack like a duck, you're a duck.
Yep.
I cannot believe so many voters in America couldn't see through Obama in his first election. All you had to do is
they didn't look past the color of his skin. They're every bit as racist as they accuse us of being.
No, they didn't look at the quality of the man. I could care what color of skin the man has. I want a good, honorable, virtuous, intelligent man that's conservative, that knows the Constitution of the United States and what you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what the race thing just doesn't matter. I'm colorblind to that. It's got to be a good, honorable man, educated correctly and with good, sound constitutional principles. And you're right. Yeah. Anti-business. He's very socialist. He wants huge government, and we've got to get ourselves away from the government manger. And they've created this entitlement culture that believes they need to feed at the government manger,
which is detrimental in every way to the survival of America.
So are we ever going to win those big New York City, East Coast City, West Coast City type votes to the conservative side? Are we going to sway them to the conservative side?
I don't know. I don't know if things have to get they do have to get much worse for them to change. And so we have to send people back to Congress who already understand, who don't have to change.
They can fight for the check and balances of the Constitution of the United States of America that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Madison and everybody set forward for us to protect us so that Utah, in a state of 3 million people, has just as much rights as a state of New York with 30-plus million people, right? But
we have the representational government, which it's the way the cookie crumbles, because we have to take the good with the bad, and it is a strong method of government, but that does, of course, give the East and West Coast more power than they should have. And so I believe that the answer, Jason, number one is education. It's the education of the American citizenry. You know, we mentioned before the last break that it is a privilege to become an American citizen. It is not a right.
Exactly.
And with that privilege comes an immense amount of responsibility, and one of those responsibilities is paying attention to what's going on and understanding what works and what doesn't work. One of my favorite people to quote is George Santayana, who said, and I paraphrase, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And it appears as if the Obama administration and those of that ilk cannot, and in fact refuse to learn from history. And yet, Jason, it is why you and I understand what is happening, and we understand what precisely has to happen in order to get us back from that brink.
Well, I can't do
Go ahead.
simple things like, and I'm just talking simplistically. Obviously, I know I'm not going to get all my apple all at once. I'm going to have to go back and take bites, right? And I'm going to have to fight that war and win battles and win battles and win battles. But go something simple in history and say, hey, Democrats and Republicans alike, the Ronald Reagan tax plan worked very, very well. Why don't we just go back in time 30 years and implement exactly, can we all agree at this moment, exactly to implement Ronald Reagan's plan that gave us like 20 years of economic growth?
It sure did. And produced tens of millions of jobs, as opposed to Barack Obama's loose 1 million that were temporary.
Right, and so it's that simple. And why are we not doing something like that in a super committee that completely fails in itself? And we have more bureaucrats out there that aren't getting things done. And do I want a flat tax and fair tax? Absolutely. I think we're all Americans together. I think the American construction worker is every bit as valuable to the United States of America as the Wall Street banker is. And we're all in this thing together. And we never came to this nation to differentiate and create caste systems between each other based upon religion or race or income.
And that's the sad part. That's what's going on right now, Jason, and it is something that has to stop.
It is, and you have to have somebody that can stand there on TV and in the halls of Congress and get that message across and say, no, don't give me that crap about you giving the biggest tax break to the rich. It's very simple. Let's just use 10%. If you're making $10,000 and you pay 10%, you pay $1,000 in taxes. If you make $100,000, you pay $10,000 in taxes. Well, you made 10 times more and you paid 10 times more in taxes, right? If you made 100 times more, you paid 100 times more in taxes. So, of course, if you lower that tax rate from 10% to 9%, that 1 percentile was larger, for the guy making $1 million a year than the guy making $100,000. But it's still fair, proportional, right?
Yes, it is.
The caste system and punish people. And bottom line, you and I both know, when you looked at the California plan on Fox the other day, that California, it was like the top 1% of income earners in California pay like 50% of the state's tax. And you're like, if you got 50% of the people not even paying any tax, the top 20% paid, 80% of the tax or something. It was just insane to go, wait, if we're all in it together and we're all paying taxes together at whatever level, people who pay taxes care a lot more about what's happening with their government. They educate themselves more. They study harder. They take more care in who they vote for. I mean, the Barack Obamas and the Liberal Party have been successful at creating a system of envy, which is a terrible principle in life, but it's based upon envy and class warfare. And they're trying to buy where all the votes are, right?
They are. Now, Jason, we need to take the top of the hour break. I'm sorry. So let's pick this up on the other side. You're going to have about 5 minutes to get up, stretch your legs, and whatever. And we'll come back and we will pick up where we left off, talking about the caste system and envy and what is being pushed by the Obama administration. And that will take us, I want to next cover the Balanced Budget Amendment and the Article 5 convention that is being called for by the states. So 5 minutes and Turning the Tide will be right back with congressional candidate Jason